Another inspirational short story. This one's called Meaning of a Dream, and it's a kind of fairy story. It starts with Griselda. Now, Griselda was walking along beside a river, and the last few days it had been raining very heavily, and so the river was running very fast. It was quite a torrent. And she reached up to get some berries that were on the side of the river to put in her basket, and she slipped and she fell into the water, and she started to flail around with her arms as the current took her, and she yelled, "Help me, somebody, help, help!" And it just so happened that there was a wizard walking past. "I'll help you," he called, "but you must pay my price." Just help me, said Griselda. Whatever. And so he did. And when she reached the bank, he told her what the price of her rescue was. It was a very high price indeed. For her daughter Matilda, who was 10 years old, was to go to the wizard when she was 13. Now, Griselda tried to block this out of her mind. And Matilda grew into a fine young woman, kind-hearted. And Griselda just hoped and prayed that the wizard would have forgotten. But on Matilda's 13th birthday, the wizard appeared and tore Matilda from her mother's arms and took her home. And there she was put to work. She had to work from morning till night. She had to keep the place absolutely spotless and cook all the meals and avoid the wizard's foul temper. She had 1 meal a day, and if the wizard was in a bad mood, she didn't even get that. And she slept high up in the wizard's cottage in a sort of turret with just the bare necessities and nothing for comfort. And so, as you can imagine, Matilda was very miserable. Her hands became red and sore with her hard work, and at night she would cry herself to sleep, not knowing how she could get away, for the wizard had put a force field all around his house so that she could not escape when he was out. Well, the days followed the days, became months, became years, and Matilda wondered whether she would spend the rest of her life in this misery. Every night she prayed for some kind of release. Now, one night, when the moon was really bright and shining into her room, and the owls were hooting outside, she was half asleep, and this figure of light appeared and gave her 3 gifts. One was a sword of truth. The second was a crystal ball for clarity. And the third was scales for justice. Now, in the morning, when Matilda awoke, she wasn't sure whether she remembered someone coming into her room, whether she had a dream, or whether the moonlight had played tricks. But that day, when the wizard left the house, she walked purposefully out of the front door. And as she did so, she got a sword of truth and hacked away at the force field. But the wizard, he returned, and he grabbed her by the arm and said, "And what do you think you're doing, young lady?" "Let me go," said Matilda. And she got the crystal ball, and the wizard said to her, "Matilda, you can't leave me. I love you." And big tears came down his cheeks. Now Matilda was a kind-hearted person and didn't like to see anyone cry. But as she held the ball of clarity, she said to him, "You don't love me. You have done nothing but abused and exploited me from the minute I arrived." With that, the wizard became very angry, and he stamped his foot in fury, and he said, "You can't leave me. Your mother made a binding contract." And Matilda produced the scales, and on one side was her mother being rescued from the river, and on the other side was all she'd been through, and the scales they tipped. And with great courage she said, "That contract is now null and void. It was unfair and unjust." And on that the wizard was so furious that he turned into a ball of absolute fury. And I don't know whether you've ever blown up a balloon and then let it go. Well, that was something like what happened to the wizard, for he went round and round and round and round, and then was nothing but a limp rag on the ground. Matilda was free. I hope you liked that story, and if you did, please click the like button. If you haven't already subscribed, do subscribe. Leave me a comment, because I always like to hear what you think about the stories. And should you like a bit more information for yourself on how to use stories, just click on the link below and I will send you my free PDF. Thank you very much for listening.